Hello and welcome to the Wine and Wisdom Show. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, welcome to spring as well. And for everybody around the world, welcome to my birthday month. It is September. It's my favorite month of the year because winter is over and I have a birthday. So lots of spoiling for me, I hope. But if you are here for the very first time, welcome to the Wine and Wisdom Show. I really appreciate you putting some time to come on live here tonight. If you are returning, thank you for coming back. It's also always so wonderful when you write in the comments and I get to see who's on and the returning people. So thank you for doing that. But for the people who are here for the very first time, I would like to tell you a little bit about this show. I believe really it's all about connection. And I think something that we can all agree on that has come out of this pandemic in a positive way is that as humans, we really crave being connected with other humans who can bring a smile to our face, they can bring some warmth to our heart, and they can bring some wisdom to our brains. And tonight we're going to get so much of that. This show being all about connection, firstly, for me to be able to connect with you and have a little wine with you. I hope you're there with something yummy in your glass. But also for me to be able to connect you with the really talented and courageous and resilient self-leaders that I am lucky enough to have in my world. And wow, tonight is no exception. Oh, I have the most incredible guest, and I have had so many people be messaging me either on LinkedIn or Facebook or via email about tonight's topic, which is called Digital Addiction, How Self-Leadership is the Number One Remedy. And we've got the amazing Dr. Christy Goodwin, who is going to be talking with us. I'm going to bring her up so you can see her smiley face. Here she comes. Oh, hey, Christy. How are
you? I'm good. I'm ironically sharing this post to social media, being digitally distracted and not walking my dog.
But not digitally addicted. Different thing altogether. Right. Yes. Well, while you are doing that, I'm going to tell everybody that a little bit about you and the fact that Christy is a digital well-being researcher. She's a performance-enhancing researcher, speaker. She's writing a book. In fact, she just told me something. She just got emailed by a fancy pants place that want to do a book deal with her as of today. So that's pretty amazing. If you go to her website, and I'm going to be putting all her links in there post this live event, you will see that she has been on the media up 10 times. Her knowledge about this digital world that we are living in and how to, I suppose, put boundaries around it so we can still perform at our best at work and in life. And as mothers, as Christy is a mother of three, so she knows all about the challenges that mums and dads have across the globe of trying to disconnect their kids from the screen. I think you call them screenagers, don't you?
I do. That's my colloquial term for them.
Yeah, I love that. So she's going to talk to us a little bit about that tonight. Let me just say, welcome, Christy. I very much appreciate you being here tonight, and I know you're going to be able to share so much wisdom.
My pleasure. It is great to be here and to be connecting virtually. I think this is one of the huge, of the many benefits that technology offers us. It's not all doom and gloom. Technology has the potential to offer us so many benefits and affordances, and to be able to connect in real time and socially distanced appropriately is one of the many benefits.
Absolutely. And this show is not about putting people on digital detoxes or another one you say being laptopless. I love that one. It's not about that, is it, at all? And we're going to talk about that. And we've got some people coming on right now. So thank you, Tiffany. Hello, Sue, Screenagers. Yes, I know Tiffany has 3 screen ages, so she is definitely going to look forward to the gold that you've got tonight. But Christy, before we go any further, I'd love you to actually introduce yourself and let everybody know who's watching about the absolute incredible work that you're doing, you're sprinkling across the globe so that we can all live a better life in this digital world.
Oh, thank you. And it is wonderful to be here. I'm going to be completely transparent and tell you that I fell into this work by a couple of serendipitous events. I had been a teacher turned academic, and my research interest was looking at the way technology was impacting children and adolescents on their physical health, their mental well-being, and their learning. And I became a bit of a frustrated academic. And I became frustrated because I could see all of this wonderful research being done, but it wasn't getting communicated and disseminated to the people that matter the most. And then I had my first son. Now, this isn't how I date his chronological age, but it's important for this story. He was born 6 months after the first iPad came out. So I went to my local healthcare clinic nurse for the regular 6-month developmental check, and the clinic nurse didn't know what I do for work. And she turned and was asking me what all the regular questions you'd expect at a 6-month check. Was he having tummy time? Was he eating solids? And then she turned and asked me what screen time he was having at 6 months of age. And I proceeded to tell her that he wasn't having any. And she leaned forward and she did the skippy sound and the wag of the finger and did the whole. And Joan, the healthcare clinic nurse, proceeded to tell me that my son would fall behind if he wasn't tapping, swiping and pinching on the iPad at 6 months of age. And she also prescribed a dose of Baby Einstein DVDs every day. Now, I was outraged. I knew as a researcher this was grossly incorrect, misleading information. So I went home, got the non-sleeping baby to have a nap, and he had one of those turbo 4-hour naps, the ones where you go in and check that they're breathing and then commando crawl out. And I was so outraged by this information that I did 2 things. The first thing, ironically, I started a social media campaign that babies need laps, not apps. It went viral. And the second thing that I did with this 4-hour nap period was write a book. And so my first book was called Raising Your Child in a Digital World, and it provided parents, educators and health professionals like Joan with research-based information about the impact technology is having. This is a really polarizing technology, particularly with kids and adolescents. So I'm a huge advocate for science-based information. So I took that information and I translated it into what parents, educators and health professionals needed to know. And that kept me busy for a number of years. And then in the last couple of years, it was through parent seminars that I was delivering that a lot of parents would come up at the end of the seminar and say, look, do you ever speak to adults about this? Because so much of what you were talking about tonight, I often talk to parents to help them understand their child or adolescent's techno tantrum. You know, why does your child emotionally combust when you remove their digital appendage? And so many adults said, I struggle with this just as much as my kids do. I may not throw the techno tantrum, but I find it hard to go laptopless or to stop the social scroll. And then the second incident that led me to where I am today, and I'm only recently sharing this, so I get a little bit emotional every time I share it, and I know you've heard me share this before too, Heidi, but I'd arrived home from a speaking engagement in Singapore, and my toddler at the time was very excited to see me, so he decided to skip his nap for that day. So I quickly opened the lid on my laptop to send a colleague an email to cancel an appointment I had. And in the space of opening the laptop and seeing the 72 unread emails that had landed in my inbox, I tried to triage that inbox very quickly, and my son fell off the lounge while I was digitally distracted. And he had a really significant fall, which required hospitalization. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Here I was, somebody who researches distraction and digital well-being, yet I was tethered to my technology. So I went on a quest to better understand why, as adults, we have become seduced by the screen. What is it about the online world that captivates, that enthralls and appeals to us? And so that's what's led me and kept me busy for the last little while, helping to understand without the guilt, because technology is here to stay, but helping us understand our digital behaviours and infatuations.
And I love that, because I have this favourite saying of mine, which is perfection is a fairy tale. So even though you've got a PhD in this, you are speaking around the world on it, you have a mega following, you are writing a book, you are across the media, it doesn't mean that you are perfect with it. And it is hard for all of us. And I think, during 2020, when we've all had to be far more digitally connected than ever before, it's pretty full on for all of us. So, I mean, I'd love to lead that into this next question, which is all about, in this year of 2020, when we have had to, oh my gosh, from the time we wake up really to the time we're going to bed, for us, this combination of work and play and everything, because even in the major lockdowns, we had to, instead of meeting people to have a glass of wine with or a chat, we had to do it through the digital world. So we were upping our time on the digital devices. But what is the impact, Christy, that's having on our physical health and our mental health?
Yes, look, the research in this space is still in some ways in its infancy, but we do know that our digital behaviours are having a fairly profound impact on our physical health, everything from our vision. We know, for example, that rates of myopia, so nearsightedness, have increased in recent years. And what we think is one of the chief contributing factors, which may surprise people, often people are quick to point the finger at technology and say, well, it's because we're looking at screens close distance. What we think is perhaps one of the other leading causes of this increase in myopia is what our time on devices is displacing. And that's what I often refer to as the opportunity cost. And it is the time that we aren't getting in natural sunlight. We know natural sunlight is a really key factor in offsetting the likelihood that we will develop myopia, which is that nearsightedness. So we know that it's impacting things like our vision. We also know our musculoskeletal health. I know physiotherapists and chiropractors during lockdown have reported increasing numbers of people presenting with things like tech neck, given that we're hunched over our devices. And often if we've been thrust into sort of work from home situations, we haven't necessarily got the right ergonomic setup for our workspace as well. Yeah. We know that it's having a profound impact even on our hearing, particularly if you've got children. Many young people like using little earbud headphones. It doesn't matter if they're the ear pod or the actual wired headphones, and they can reach 130 decibels. Safe levels for kids are an absolute maximum of 85 decibels. So what does every child do when they put headphones on? Crank up the volume. And so they're almost doubling their threshold. And in fact, the World Health Organization estimates that 1.1 billion, that's with a B, billion people could potentially suffer from noise-induced hearing loss in the next couple of years. So it's not about saying don't wear headphones. It's about saying, well, how can we wear the right headphones? So limiting our headphones to listening to music for no more than an hour a day, wearing the noise-cancelling earmuff style headphones in lieu of the earpod or earbud headphones. Yeah. We also know, and this one I think crosses over both our physical health and our mental well-being, one of the biggest risks to our health and well-being is the way that technology is sabotaging our sleep. That has a prolific impact on our, as I said, our mental health and our physical health as well. Yeah. When it comes to mental health and well-being, the research is still in its infancy, and we hear a lot of popular media about how social media and smartphones are the root cause of the decline in mental health outcomes, particularly with adolescents and young people. And the research is a real bugbear of mine. The research tells us that there is a correlation. There is definitely a correlation between time spent on social media platforms and smartphones and poor mental health outcomes. But what we don't yet have is the research to prove causation. Is it the fact that people with existing mental health issues gravitate more towards the online world because it's a compensatory tool, or it's a form of escapism, or it's a coping mechanism? Or is it the other way around, that technology, that these social media and smartphones are actually contributing to the poor mental health outcomes? And I actually think the Christie hypothesis at this stage, and from the research that we are conducting, that it's the opportunity cost. It's that displacement effect of some of our most basic psychological needs. And I think sleep, relationships, and physical movement are some of the key things that our technology habits are displacing that might be causing the mental health risks that we're seeing.
Yeah.
There's a huge cascade of consequences. Even something as simple, we know poor mental health outcomes can be associated with people depending on what social media platforms they're on. So it's a really nuanced conversation. It's not to say, you know, all social media causes this, but something that many adults and teenagers are affected by is the compare and despair phenomenon, where we compare our lives to the A-roll highlight reel that we see others depicting and curating online.
Yeah. I mean, I everything you've just said is quite amazing, and I mean, for everybody who's listening, you can hear that Christy comes from such a research background, but she's able to, you know, put it through this wonderful filter so that it is yeah, understandable for Joe Blow public like me. But is it Sonia? I don't know if that's the right way to say. I'm sorry that the audio is dropping out, but yes, the answer to your question is that it is recorded, and we will. Christy and I will both post it again on our Facebook pages, and it'll also be on my website. So we will be able to send you that. I do apologise for whatever the techno gods are doing, but we will continue on. Christy, you talked about the impact on sleep, and I want us to kind of go back to a conversation that the two of us had a little while ago. We were both speaking at a global virtual conference, and as we were waiting in the curtain area, we were talking about both of our issues with insomnia, and realised that both of our issues have come from the fact that we both woke up at very different times, of course, in a life-threatening situation. And what we both now know is that our brains have put this connection with our sleep being the fact that we are in danger, and that both of us were in a situation that, you know, if we listened out to the warning signs, and therefore going to sleep now, we have this kind of unconscious thing going on that we're listening out for some kind of warning to prevent being in that danger again. There's two parts to this story and this question. The first part I'd love you to share with everybody who's listening, because your story, despite it being a horrendous accident, frightening, freaky, is actually very funny as well. And when I still think about it, I still laugh. So I'd love you to share that first with everyone, because I think it's a really funny story that will lead to something very important. So please stay for the humour, but then stay for the learning. Off you go.
Okay, so several years ago, I think it was 2007, it was when the Pasha Bolka got stuck off the coast of Newcastle. So it was a stormy, wet Friday evening, and we were in Sydney. My husband and I had just moved into our first house that we had bought, a renovator's delight, they said, and my husband's a builder. So he had come home from work early because it was a stormy day, and we had completed the whole internal fit out of the house that we were working on. He came home and literally hung up artworks inside our bedroom that particular afternoon. We had a huge, and I mean huge, it was 8 tons we discovered after the storm, an 8-ton gum tree in our front yard. And when we moved in, or before we purchased the house, in fact, we checked with the real estate agent about the tree, because I was a little bit dubious of a tree hanging over the front of the house, and he said, no, you've got council approval to remove it. However, when we applied to council to have the large specimen removed, we were told that no such permission had been granted, and that it was a healthy tree and we could trim 10% of it. So we were in our bed on this stormy night, and it was howling. It was absolutely horrific. And I woke up and said to my husband, that tree is going to fall down. And being a man and the logical builder that he is, he said, don't be ridiculous, Christy. Trees that size don't fall down. You are fine. Go back to sleep. And so I nuzzled into him, into his shoulder, and was laying there, and that 10-ton gum tree fell and literally rested on our bed head. It blew off and collapsed the roof on top of us and blew out the side of our house. My husband was an ex-footballer, so he got out from the debris and said, I'm going to go and get help. And I had beams and tiles, literally the whole roof, and a tree branch that had punctured the mattress next to me, and it was pitch black and the storm and rain was coming in. But the problem was, and I should have rejoiced that my husband had said he was going to get help whilst I was pinned underneath the rubble. The problem, and the reason I wasn't so excited, was that I used to sleep without pajamas on, so I was stark naked, and all I was worried about was being rescued in the nude. So my husband went off, and he said, I can't lift the beams off you, Christy. You're stuck. I need to go and get help. And I said, well, get help, but get me clothes as well, because our wardrobe had landed in the next door neighbour's backyard. So he went off to get help, and I actually have no recollection of this next part, but I, in between him leaving, I had somehow mustered up that superhuman strength that often happens in freak accidents, and I got out from underneath the rubble, and I went and found my pink Nokia phone, and I decided, because I was in shock, to ring my mum. And I rang my mum. This was 3 o'clock in the morning. I rang my mum to tell her that I was dead. And her first response was, Christy, have you been drinking? Have you taken drugs? Put Nick on the phone. And I said, I don't know where Nick is. I think he's died too. This is my husband. Anyway, I'm on the phone to my mum, stark naked, telling her that I'm dead. And my husband and a team of neighbours turn up with a spotlight. And I realised at that point in time that I wasn't dead, that I was in fact naked, in full view of the rescue team, many of which were our neighbours. So I hung up from my mum. She had no idea what was going on. She's trying to ring my husband and find out, had I overdosed on drugs, what was going on. Anyway, we sorted it out. All was resolved. We lived in a beautiful hotel for 9 months while they repaired and restored our house. But there was a really strong, as you said, Heidi, really strong association from that point in time between my brain associating sleep with danger. And then for nearly 12 years after that, I have suffered from really terrible insomnia.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing about the nudity story. It was fantastic. And yes, Magdalene saying that her sleep. I'm glad that's a good learning for you, Magdalene. But of course, it leads me to this next part. Thank you for sharing. It's hysterical. But of course, 12 years of insomnia. Productivity when you're sleep deprived is so much lower, isn't it? We cannot be expected to be at our best. I mean, I know you shared with me that your husband even was not wanting you to drive the kids anymore because you were so sleep deprived. That's how bad it got. But linking this back to what we've been talking about, you are a productivity guru, and we're going to share tonight, everybody. I will put in the show notes. Christy has an amazing course that she's gifting everybody about productivity and how to do that better in this digital world. So you will get that. But our digital devices, as you said, are having a huge impact on our ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. And, of course, that impacts our ability to be productive at work the next day. So what are some of the things that you have learned over 12 years of having to, because it doesn't matter, does it, why we're sleep deprived? It doesn't matter. The fact is, when we wake up that next day and we feel horrendous, then we need to find a way to put something in our lives so that we can try and get to sleep and stay asleep. What are some of the things that you've learned?
Look, I'm going to say when it comes to technology, there are some things, some strategies that we can put in place to try and minimize the impact that technology is having on our sleep. So I want to just explain how our screen habits, because often there are some things that there are some things that we sometimes overlook that seem rather, benign, but can actually really over a period of time have a negative and cascading impact on our sleep. So we know if we are using particularly handheld devices, so smartphones and tablet devices, in the 60 to 90 minutes before we fall asleep, it can not only delay the onset of sleep because these small devices emit blue light. Blue light goes into our eyes and hits the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is what makes melatonin. And so our pineal gland gets a message that from this blue light, it's time to stay awake, don't make melatonin. And so our poor amount of melatonin, or the decrease in melatonin, means that we're not falling asleep quickly and easily. So it can push back the time that we would normally fall asleep. And over time, those sleep delays can accumulate, as you said, into a really negative sleep deficit. But the other way, and I think sometimes we often overlook this, is that if we're on our devices in that 60 to 90 minutes, it can stimulate the limbic system, so the emotional center of our brain. It can activate the sympathetic nervous system, so we enter that fight, flight, or flee. You only need to see one, stressful email or one sort of unkind message or upsetting post on social media, and you can really activate that stress response. The other way that our digital habits can encroach on our sleep is that if we are using them before we fall asleep, we know from studies that are emerging now that our REM sleep, so the phase of our sleep cycle, the rapid eye movements phase of the sleep cycle, it's the fourth component or the fourth phase of our sleep. This is the part of our sleep which is where memory consolidation occurs. And we now know that if we are exposed to too much blue light in the period before we go to sleep, people are not getting a sufficient amount of the REM stage of sleep. That phase of the sleep cycle is a lot shorter in people on devices. So it's a double whammy. Not only are we often not getting enough sleep because we're going to sleep later because of either we're on the device and it's pushing back our bedtime, or the blue light effect that is delaying the onset of sleep. Not only are we not getting the right amount, but we're also not getting good quality deep sleep. REM sleep is basically when our brain does all its backing up, pardon the analogy, but it's almost like that consolidation stage. And so this is why we can feel tired and foggy. And as you said, it has huge impacts on our well-being.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you should say, it just reminded me, thank you, Karen, nice to see you. It does make so much sense, and Christy has such great information. In fact, it's such good information. I had somebody message me today to say they have been off all social media for the last 12 months, but knowing that we were going to be talking about this tonight, they were thinking about coming back on Facebook just so they could watch it. Andrea, if you are here and you have connected with them, hello. I just wanted to say that. But I want to go back to Sonia's, sorry, Sonia, I don't know if that's how you say your name. You've got your teenager sitting next to you, and he or she would like to know, to explain some of the other mental health impacts that our overuse of digital use has on us.
Yes, we know there's some research telling us that there is a strong association between social media use, and again, depending on the types of platforms and the types of people you are following on these platforms, and negative body image for both boys and girls. Often we associate body image with an issue that only confronts girls, and the research is telling us that it is definitely an issue affecting both sexes. So it can have that negative impact. I think the biggest thing with young people and mental health is, again, as I said before, it's the displacement effect. It's the fact that, and at this point in time, particularly if you are in an area in the world that is impacted by a lockdown situation and you don't have the opportunity to connect in real time with real people, then social media can be a wonderful alternative. but for a long period of time, or if that is our only mechanism of connection with real people, we are missing out on really important opportunities for relationships. We are hardwired. One of our most basic psychological drivers and needs as human beings is the need to be part of a relational tribe. We are hardwired to connect. And I am worried that too much time on social media or too much time just checking, we didn't specify social media, but too much time online is at the detriment of our time to connect with real people in real time. We know when we are physically in connection with people, our brains release oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It's a social bonding hormone. So we are still, as I said, in our infancy in terms of our understanding. I don't know if it's so much the direct connection or cause of social media and or smartphones or technology use that is solely responsible for poor mental health outcomes, but I definitely think that it's the displacement effect that is certainly having a contributing role in mental health outcomes.
No, thank you for that explanation. And I mean, I go back to again, what I said right at the beginning is that one thing that I think we've all really, it's just kind of made us realize so much more than we've ever known, is that to have proper human interaction and connection, we've craved it. I mean, I have craved it when I get to properly connect, to have, you know, from a work perspective, obviously people in a room in front of me, you see facial expressions and body language and you have that banter, but just on a social thing, you know, that, yeah, sure, we can talk together right now, and this is amazing because we can share your wisdom with the world through platforms like this, but it's nothing like being face to face with a real human, is there?
And I wanted to just add, I'm going to say two things there. I experienced that during the period when we were in lockdown. We had an Uber food delivery, and I raced out and started talking to the Uber delivery guy, and I just would not let him go. And my sons were calling out. I think they were hungry. Yeah. Like, leave the man alone, Mum.
That's hysterical.
And it hit me because my husband was deemed an essential worker. I was trying to homeschool 3 kids, and I don't pivot, I pirouette, tried to pirouette my business at the same time, and I was craving that connection. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on that you were talking about, and I think is so important, is the need for social connection, and how the online world is a great alternative for this particular time. But I want to address the whole concept of Zoom fatigue, because so many people at the moment are talking about how mentally depleted and fatigued they feel because of all the video conferencing they're doing, be that Teams or Zoom or whatever WebEx platform they're using. And what we know is exactly what you were just talking about then, is that it is the, you know, when we're looking at a little head in a box, it is the absence of social cues. It is the absence of body language. It is all of those things that are making our brain work even harder to process information in this virtual format. It's also the superfluous information in somebody's background. You know, when you see your boss and his house or her house, and you're trying to figure out where they might live, or your boss's partner walks past semi-naked. That has happened to me. Not with my husband. I was the one witnessing it with someone who had a very high up position, and their whole team was on this video conference call, and her husband came out without the lower half of his clothing on, shall I say. True. But there are so many things, you know, that makes our brain work even harder. But the most fascinating thing, I think, the reason we're all feeling so depleted and exhausted online is because this is the very first time in history when we have been in a social dynamic, when we're on virtual meetings, where we can actually see our own faces. We can see all of our idiosyncrasies, all of the strange mannerisms that we never knew we had. So it's called impression management. And so this is the very first time in a social context where we're actually seeing ourselves, and it is so depleting. There is a great meme on social media. I'll see if I can share it afterwards, of Matthew McConaughey, and it says, if this is what Matthew McConaughey looks like on Zoom, I don't stand a chance. And it's a rather unflattering photo.
Oh, I don't see that one. Please share it. I'm a bit of a fan of his.
I'll share it with you.
Thank you very much. Well, and thank you, Tiffany. Yes, this is not a virtual background that I've got. I am also married to a talented builder, Christy. I didn't know that about you. So there we go. Comment. Thankfully, for 2020, I've got a lovely background to be able to do my work in.
Well, I don't, and that's why I've got the decorative one, because I married the builder, and this is going to one day be our forever house. So,
okay. Well, I like your background a lot. So I want to come back to the byline of what I put on this title, is that why self-leadership is the number one remedy to digital addiction. And I made that up. You didn't tell me to make that the headline, but the reason that I've put it, because really no one can do it for us, can they? We have to make our own decision about the boundaries that we make in our digital lives and the usage that we have. It is up to us. There are apps and there are different things that we can put in place, but we have to first download that app, don't we? We have to first do that. We've got to lead ourselves. We've got to start with, I need to do something about this digital addiction or obsession or attachment or overuse, whatever words you want to put to yourself, because I know that I'm not as productive, I don't sleep as well, and I'm lacking with all the human connections that I could be perhaps getting as long as I'm not in Victoria or in other places of the world. It is really up to us. Self-leadership is necessary for us to put the boundaries. Is that right, Christy? Or am I just...
No, absolutely. No, you're spot on. And I think there are certainly some factors working against us. These technologies that we all use and love and that are integral to our lives have been deliberately engineered to hook us. There are some really persuasive, clever, sneaky design techniques that get us hooked. The fact that they meet our most basic psychological needs. I talked before about the need for connection. We also know two of our other most basic fundamental needs are the need for competence and control, and technology fulfills those needs so perfectly. Yeah. We also know that when we use technology, it causes neurobiological changes in our brains and our bodies. For example, we know we often get hits of dopamine when we're online, particularly if we're doing something that's pleasurable. This is, if you're a parent, why you may also experience the techno tantrum. The techno tantrum is often that withdrawal of dopamine because the brain's craving more and more of it. But that dopamine actually overrides the logical prefrontal cortex of our brain. So the part of our brain that helps us with self-regulation, that's the impulse control center, when we get a squirt of dopamine, it floods that part of the brain and inhibits our capacity to self-regulate. So this is why we say, I'm just going to watch one episode on Netflix tonight. And 1 becomes 2 becomes 4. The other reason that happens is, let's blame Netflix, is because the autoplay feature on all of these streaming services and YouTube has now become the default setting. And so the online world is now this bottomless bowl. There's no stopping point. There are no stopping cues. So there are the technology has been designed to work against us. So you are exactly right. We have to put in place strategies. We have to build, I call it build a fortress around your focus. We have to install apps. We have to, I think, develop the constraints. We need, I call it creating borders and boundaries. Where are you going to use technology and where are you going to say, no, I'm not going to bring it to the dinner table, or when I go out with my partner, it's not going to go with us. Is your bedroom a no-go tech zone? We've got to set parameters. one of the easiest things you can do is have an autoresponder set up. If you're going to have a period of time where you need to get some, what Cal Newport calls your deep work done, or you need to get some work done without distraction, have an email autoresponder, or have in your email signature an expected response rate. So there are so many strategies, practical things, something as simple as activating do not disturb mode when you need to do deep focused work. There are very few instances and there are very few jobs, apart from if you're this is a really terrible example. I was going to say an air traffic controller, but there's probably not many of them at the moment. Or if you're in customer service, but there are very few jobs that require instantaneous communication with clients or colleagues. Yet most of us, the ping of email hums throughout the day, or Slack or team notifications, and they divert our productivity. They put a dent in our productivity, and they have a huge impact on our well-being. So we need to put strategies in place. We need to come up with those rules about where, when, how we'll use the technology, because if we don't put those rules in place, the technology will use us. So I talk about taming our tech habits so that we're not a slave to our screen. Yeah. Easier said than done.
It is easier said than done. And I'd love those who are watching, I'd love you to put in the comments one thing that you do successfully. It might not be all the time, because perfection is a fairy tale, like I've said, but the one thing that you do to tame your tech habit and ensure that you can have time for deep work or time for connection. I'd love to hear it. I'm sure Christy would like to know what you're doing. One thing for me, I certainly do not have, there's no phones at the dinner table. Dinner to me is, I set it every night, I light a candle, we have nice food, and we drink nice wine. But even if we're not having wine, we'll still have a wine glass with water in it, because just to make it that special time where there is real connection going on. But I am I know how easily distracted I am, and I need to certainly put fortress around my focus. I think especially more than any time this year, when things have had to change so much and reinvention has had to happen, and creativity, because that's a whole nother topic. The creativity part of our brain completely deteriorates when we are just doing that all the time, isn't it right?
Yeah. And that's why I often say I'm not a huge advocate of digital detoxes. I think detoxes often create a binge and purge cycle, and they don't get to the root of what's really causing these digital behaviors. And Nir Eyal has written a great book called Indistractable, and he unpacks this idea, and he often talks about we can have external distractions, so we can have pings, alerts and notifications, but often it is the internal distractions. We're often thinking about things. So some other strategies that might work for people, I call it the proximity strategy, and it's the I often say the basics work if you work the basics. Keep the technologies that are distracting out of your line of sight when you need to focus, or when you want to be present with your partner or your children. Just seeing your phone can be a psychological trigger to reach for it. Also, why we should be keeping it out of our bedrooms, because we know just seeing it can be that trigger for, I wonder if my client replied to that email, or, I wonder how many messages I'll get in the morning. Proximity strategy, out of sight, out of mind. And the other part of the proximity strategy is keep your tech temptations off the home screen of your smartphone. So often we unlock our phone to make a phone call or to use it for a functional purpose, maybe check the weather, and that really, whatever your weakness is, maybe it's Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok if you're a teen, or someone that likes cheap entertainment, whatever it is, if you see it, you will be tempted to open it. And again, through no fault of your own, the app icon colors have been deliberately designed to hijack our attention and to be captivating. When Steve Jobs released the first iPod Touch, he, in one of his media statements, said that he wanted the icons to be so appealing that people wanted to lick their phone.
Oh,
I know. Think about that.
Right.
That's not a COVID safe practice. I'm putting that out there and say, do not do that.
Anyway,
But it speaks volumes. The fact that your notification bubble for most of us is red. Deliberate choice. Red is associated with urgency, danger, critical information. And so all of these things have been applied to make these devices really captivating for all of us. So that's why we have to put those policies in place as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what chance? We have to fight so hard with self-leadership strategies when we've got the big guys like Facebook making icons that are lickable. Like truly, like it feels like, it's such a monster that we have to fight against to keep that focus around our fortress around our focus.
Yeah.
We've got some great.
We really do. We do, and I was going to say it is, the technology is not going away. So whether we love it or loathe it, the reality is that it's here. I think we've all realised during the lockdown and the health pandemic that these devices are our portal. They're our portal for leisure. They're our portal for learning. They're our portal for work, and they do play an integral part in our lives. But I believe, and I went off on a tangent before, that digital disconnection, we need opportunities to unplug. And I have digital dementia. So I didn't fully answer your last question on creativity. I got sidetracked. But we know that the brain, we have these ancient Paleolithic brains, and they have not evolved to cope with the constant 24/7 online switched, busy digital world that we have all inherited. Yeah. And one of the key things, I work with a lot of corporate teams, and they want to bolster productivity and look after staff well-being. And one of the best things that we can do for both of those things is to carve out times for digital disconnection. It doesn't have to be a detox. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. We need opportunities to punctuate our weeks with white space. We need time to enter. Neuroscientists call it the mind-wandering mode, or the default mode of thinking. And this is where we daydream. When you used to, in times long ago, go on an aeroplane and you would have really great ideas, or you'd go for a swim or go for a run or have a shower, and this genius idea would land. You entered that daydreaming, mind-wandering state. We live in a world now where we fill that white space with the scroll of the screen. Yeah. So important. It is so important. And I'm really pleased to see that some of us, or some people who are watching, are doing such a great job. I mean, Magdalene leaves her phone in the car when she's meditating, because even the vibration she can feel. Sonia says her teen actually has no tech in bed. That's very impressive for a teen. Sleeps better because of it. Thank you. That's great to hear. Mitch, I'm glad you have a no phone zone as well at dinner. It's time to talk about the day. Absolutely. And Sue is telling us that, airplane mode, 9:30 a.m. and not turned on until 8 a.m. I think she's maybe meeting 9:30 p.m. to 8 a.m. Amazing. That is terrific. So thank you, everybody, for that. If you have, I've gone way over time, as I usually do, because there's so much wisdom in our guest tonight, Christy. But if you do have a final question, because I've just got a couple for her, but please put them in the comments. So, Christy, my second last question to you is, during this time where we are completely reliant on our digital world, you've told us how the research requires us to have time out from it. And, when I talk about the fact that we need to boost our resilience so we can deal with this stressful, uncertain world, I'd love to know what you're doing. And it might be to do with this digital conversation, but it might not be. But what are you doing right now to ensure that you are resilient enough as a speaker and a trainer who's usually doing things very differently, so you can keep on keeping on? I'm going to say I've got 3 S's, and they're probably not what you think. The first one, that I know my resilience, my coping mechanism, my mental health, and my productivity is all underpinned by good quality sleep. And I know it's a message we hear time and time again, but I have learnt, having lived through years of terrible insomnia, and now being close to being on the other side more consistently, the incredible improvement in my output and the way I can focus and my mental well-being has definitely been shaped by sleep. The next S, and I know you're thinking that it's one of the S's, it is being able to ask for support. As a mum who runs a business, I have learnt the hard way that I need to be able to ask for support. And what I have learnt, one of the many blessings, is that people love being able to support you, to reciprocate the favour, or to be one of those support mechanisms. So whether that's support in my business, support with the logistics of my kids, or just a friend to have a chat to. And the third S, and this is the one that I'm still working on, it is to savour the slow. When I feel overwhelmed, when I feel bombarded by technology, when I feel like my resilience is waning, to carve out time, and it's that disconnection. So for me, it's time at the beach. It is being fully present and soaking up my children's yumminess and scrumptiousness. It's reading a book. It's doing something that I know my brain needs, because, as I said, we haven't been engineered, or we haven't been designed to be plugged in and switched on around the clock. So they're my three: sleep, support, and savouring the slow.
Oh, I love that. Those three. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm just going to use those all the time, because it's exactly what I need for my own life to build my own resilience. So thank you for putting an S to all of them. I would like, before my last question, if you could help with Magdalene. She wants to know how to convince a teenager that this is all a really good thing. And I would imagine you would get asked this a lot, Christy.
Yes. So prior to COVID, I would travel around Australia speaking to a lot of teenagers themselves in schools. And what I have learned, having spoken to lots of teenagers along the way, is, first of all, if you get their buy-in, teenagers are really interested in this topic because they know that technology is an integral part of their lives. So if you can have conversations with them and get their input into how they form these healthy relationships with technology, that is much more worthwhile. It is much more receptive than if you are to just impose a technology contract or tell them what you should be doing. The other thing I have found through lived experience with teenagers is that they respond really favourably to facts and science. It's really hard to argue. They'll try, don't get me wrong. They'll try to counteract you with an argument, but when you present them with facts and science, they're much more amenable to the information that you present. So I've created a couple of programs. They're 30-minute videos for teenagers on healthy digital habits and taming digital distractions, because I had so many parents say, they don't listen to me, I'm just mum or I'm just dad and I know nothing. Can you talk to them? So there's some options for you with that space. And I think the other thing with teens is even just getting them to try one or two things and getting them to have that first-hand tangible experience of the benefits can be a surefire way to get them on board and to try more things as well.
Christy, would you mind actually putting those URLs in the comments after we finish? Because I think there'd be a lot of people who'd love to have a look at those. That'd be great.
No problem.
And which brings me to my final question, which is, this show is the wine of wisdom. I've certainly been having a little wine. Now I want your final piece of wisdom, which is, which piece of wisdom have you actually been gifted by somebody in your life? And what was the impact that it made on you?
So I really would love to be able to credit this to the person who said it to me, but I actually don't remember. It was one of these notes. I had a couple of mentors at the time, and I used to make notes as I spoke to them, and I did not attribute this particular note to who said it. So the saying is to prioritize the potent. And it is something that I live by personally and professionally. It is what has enabled me to build a business while raising 3 young kids at home full time. It has enabled me to be really connected and spend lots of time with my kids and try and build a healthy, positive relationship with my husband. Because if we don't prioritize what is potent and what is important to us, then this online world will recalibrate those priorities for us. It will thrust those priorities in our face. So, for me, it has been to prioritize the potent with everything that I do.
Yeah.
Again, easier said than done.
Well, it is, but I think like when we acknowledge these things, that is the first step for anything, right? Just to have that acknowledgement, so we can then go, all right, what do I need to do now? And what is the most important to move me forward in whatever way? Because it's just so easy to get stuck in procrastination when we've just overloaded with so many things to do and so many responsibilities across professional and personal life. But
and that problem is, I was going to say, is really amplified in the online space because we have something called, I call it infobesity. It's this idea that in this online world, we are drowning in information constantly. And so it is like getting a fire hydrant and squirting that fire hydrant at a little plastic cup, and your brain is that little plastic cup trying to run around and catch the bit, and it's overflowing everywhere. And so that is happening all the time, and that's why so many of us feel, I call it techno stress, but why we often feel overloaded and overwhelmed and bombarded and burnt out. And that is where we have to come back to, what are my key priorities? What are the core tasks that I need to be doing? Is email really a core task for me all of the time? What do I need to be doing in my personal life that is a priority? Because if we don't prioritize those things, thanks to shared calendars now, it means that other people can prioritize their needs above ours. So,
absolutely. Oh, Christy, you have given absolute gold tonight. Thank you so much. I can't tell you, there's just so much wisdom in everything you've given us. For those of you who are watching either now or if you are watching a little later with the recording, please feel free to put any comments in. I'm sure Christy would be happy to come back. I'm going to put her social media links in, plus the URL to her productivity hacks course, which I really recommend we all do, so that we can put that fortress around our focus. If you would like to know who's coming up in our Wine and Wisdom shows, please DM me and I will be able to put you on a list that gives you the notification for that. But Christy, thank you so much. I think especially in 2020, this is the most relevant conversation. For those who have children, of course, that the kind of insights that you've been able to give them have been gold. But for all of us who are trying to live our best lives and be really focused on, making big leaps in the world or just making tiny little steps every single day, we can't do it unless we have a little bit better sleep, a little more productivity, and a greater depth of focus. So I think everything that you have told us tonight, I would say to everybody, choose one of them, just one thing, and master that first and see how that has helped you, and then perhaps choose something else.
I agree completely. I often say, don't eat the whole watermelon, just take a small bite, take a nibble, a little micro habit, embed that, and then move on to something else and let those habits stack.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for being here tonight on a Wednesday night. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the wisdom that Christy's been here sharing with us. And I really look forward to seeing you in a fortnight's time. Good night.
Thanks, Heidi.